My guest is obviously a stout conservationist and is currently the co-founder and director of the International Campaign Against Canned Hunting. He's also the co-founder of the Kalahari Raptor Center and the co-author of 2 books, including Canned Hunting and National Disgrace. And he's a retired advocate of the high courts of Zimbabwe and Botswana. So please help us give a very warm welcome to Mr. Chris Mercer. Chris, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris. I know it's very early in the morning in South Africa at this time, so thank you. But you have such an important mission ahead of you. I really wanted to share it with our listeners. What can you tell us as far as the industry goes? How big of an industry is canned hunting in South Africa right now?
It's an enormous industry. It's huge. When I started campaigning against canned hunting in the late 90s, after the Cook report came out, showing that lioness being shot against the fence in front of her cubs, it was quite small. There were only a few hundred captive lions in captivity. But despite my best efforts, the industry has mushroomed. And there are now more than 8,000 captive lions in South African game farms being bred for no other purpose than to be shot by hunters.
Unbelievable. Who is breeding this? Are these people who are in business specifically to supply this trade?
Yes, they're farmers for the most part who simply look at the economics. They see how much money they can earn per hectare per year out of cattle and sheep farming, and then they look at what they can make out of providing animals for canned hunts, and of course they can make so much money that they all change over from growing animals for food to growing tame wild animals for hunting. There are now more than 10,000 game farms in South Africa.
And that's just in South Africa. Wow. Unbelievable. That brings me to I guess, an interesting topic that always comes up. Whenever I encounter supporters for canned hunting, the number one defense response I always hear is that hunters make a significant contribution to regional conservation through the action of hunting these animals like lions. Now, is this true?
Absolutely not. Of course, industry propaganda would have you believe that hunting is a tool of conservation. But in fact, along with habitat loss and other aspects of modern development, hunting is a major threat to conservation.
In what way? Is it just simply in the way that the animals are being taken out of the ecosystem, or is there more to it?
No, there's a lot more to it than that. But let me just start by saying that the debate will always be clouded by public relations. And I think it was a great American physicist, Richard Feynman, who made a statement in his judgment on the Challenger disaster. You may recall he made those, he stated those immortal words: "The truth should never be subordinated to public relations because you can't fool nature." And I'm afraid that the hunting industry has full-time, in-house, professional public relations experts with nothing else to do in their high-paid jobs but to whitewash the hunting industry. And they're very successful. And you can't just single out big hunting for this criticism. The same would apply to tobacco. You might recall that when Robert Koop was appointed to the Surgeon General's office by President Bush, in his autobiography, he writes that when he arrived at the office, which is supposed to care for the health of Americans, there was an office rule making it a fireable offense to make any statements to the effect that smoking was bad for your health. So it's not unusual for big business, I would think the pharmaceutical companies do the same thing,
Yes.
to invade and occupy regulatory space and then to employ sophisticated public relations in order to whitewash their activities.
It's quite a well-oiled machine.
It's an extremely well-oiled machine, and the gist of their public relations, which I have been subjected to over and over again over the years, and I'm sure when I die, their false arguments will be branded on my brain, because they actually come out with nothing new. They're making the same arguments today that they were making when I started campaigning 15 years ago. Basically, they say that they bring money into rural areas. Well, there's almost not even a germ of truth in that, because the rural areas that they operate in South Africa are not wilderness areas. These are farms. These are areas that used to be growing meat for consumption, and they're now growing animals to be shot. There's no community benefit in that. There's always been money made. There are no more people employed. In fact, there are far fewer people employed in hunting than there would be in farming. So actually, it's a wasteful use of land.
So unless you're directly involved in the hunting operation, I would assume that locals in the community would not really see any of this, apparent money, conservation money that is being flooded in by hunters, I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'd go further and say that the very nature of the business of making private deals with wealthy foreigners lends itself to foreign currency swindles and to making profits outside the country. I would think that a great deal of money that ought to be coming into South Africa actually remains outside and goes into the Cayman Islands or Switzerland or some other tax haven.
What about the meat? I often hear people who argue for hunting saying that the meat will also go to the local community. I mean, do people eat lion?
Absolutely not, although, as you know, every now and again some restaurant in America decides to come up with this exotic meat.
I apologize for the jackass.
It never lasts long normally. The local activists get together and make such a fuss that they have to take it off the menu.
Yeah.
No, that's more public relations. And I think that even your listeners who may not know much about conservation in Africa, I mean, they're intelligent enough to smell public relations when they see it, No, it's nothing to do with the meat. As I say, these are farms that have stopped producing meat and are now producing living targets for trophy collectors.
And is it entirely a foreign served industry? Are canned hunters entirely foreign?
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. The breakdown is about 55%, more than half are from the United States, which would make the United States hunting industry a weapon of mass destruction. About 40% from the European Union, and a small number from other countries, a growing number from countries in the Middle East, Far East, and Russia.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when somebody comes in and pays their thousands of dollars to get a lion, and they are successful in essence in getting a lion, do they get to pick the animal? I mean, what is the situation like for the most part? I know it can vary from farm to farm, but when you're out there, is there an actual chase, or is there any actual hunt to it, or is it just what I would imagine it to be are some guys driving around in a Jeep, spot an animal, and shoot it? I mean, am I off?
No, you're not off, but it's much easier than that. Imagine a Walmart for hunting. Basically, you go online and you see a photograph of your lion and the price is there. You then contact the hunting operator and you say, oh, that's a magnificent animal. How much will he cost me? You make the deal with him. And then you fly to South Africa. And because you're not a real hunter, you take your family with you, and you're met at the airport, and you're taken to stay in 5-star luxury, where you and your family are pampered. And your lion is just waiting for you. When you feel like it, you go out. And I'm sorry to say that a lot of people seem to derive pleasure from shooting arrows into lions. I don't know what the proportion is, but a large number, possibly even more than half of the lions, are actually shot with bow and arrow.
That's crazy. Now, when a hunter does come away with a trophy, I assume they bring back the skin for a mount. What happens to the rest of the carcass locally? Is it distributed to anybody? I know that there's this rise for demand of lion bones in the Asian markets. Is any of this going to that as well?
Yeah, let me come to that. But first of all, you've asked a couple of times if or when the hunter gets his trophy. The whole point of canned hunting is that there's no if or when about it. The fact that the animal has been identified, it's a tame animal, it's in an enclosure of whether it's 1 acre or 100 acres doesn't make any difference. And because it is identified and it cannot escape, it is said to be in the can. In other words, and hence the phrase canned hunting. So there's no if about it. He will get that specific animal. And then, of course, the cape, the head and the skin, of course, will go to the taxidermist to be made into a rug or some other useless clutter to be hung up on some putzer's wall. But as far as the rest of the body is concerned, for many years, when I started campaigning, the rest of the body was simply buried. But nowadays, of course, with the growth of the lion bone trade to Asia, all those old bones are being very quickly dug up because they're fetching a great deal of money. Now, I went through to Cape Town last month in order to interview quite a famous documentary filmmaker, Carl Ammann, who works for Der Spiegel and other German media. And he had just come back from a fact-finding mission in Vietnam and Laos, or PDR, People's Democratic Republic of Laos, as it's now called. Let's just keep calling it Laos. Now, they buy lion bones because lion bones are genetically similar to tiger bones, and for generations, if not millennia, Chinese traditional medicine has maintained that there is some medicinal value in tiger bones. So what they do is they boil up these lion or tiger bones in a huge vat, and they add, according to Carl, ingredients such as turtle shell, monkey bone, and deer antler. And once they've dried it up and turned it into a powder, they either put it into wine and sell it as tiger bone wine as a medicine, although it has never been shown to have any medicinal value, or the Vietnamese prefer to take it as a cake. It looks like a little bar of black soap. And to give you an idea of the sort of profits that these wildlife crime syndicates, these wildlife traffickers can make, a lion carcass will cost them $1,000. Once it's been processed, as I've explained, it is sold for $1,000 per 100 milligram bar. In other words, the carcass becomes worth about $70,000.
Wow. Wow. Oh my goodness. That is absurd. I don't even know what to say to that. I'm kind of stuck on that still. That's a huge profit margin, obviously very attractive for locals. Are there any laws at all in South Africa in place that keep this kind of hunting in check, or is there anything on the horizon that seems optimistic about, helping them in that sense?
No. Let me come to laws in a second, Danny. Just to finish off the last point,
please.
With that kind of obscene profit, it puts lions in the same class as rhino horn. And that's why I say that you should disregard hunting propaganda. Lion farming and canned hunting is a major threat to the survival of wild lion populations, because with those kind of obscene profits being made, lions are going to be poached in the wild for their bones, just as the rhinos are being slaughtered and the elephants are being slaughtered for their ivory. So that goes to the point we were discussing earlier, whether hunting is a threat to conservation or not. But coming now to the question of laws, there is absolutely no legislation governing lion farming and canned hunting in South Africa. In fact, the TOPS regulations, that's the acronym for Threatened or Protected Species regulations, do not currently have lions listed. Now, you may be shocked to hear that lions are not even listed in the legislation, but the reason was that the minister in charge of conservation made an effort to deflect public anger against lion farming and canned hunting by trying to introduce in the new TOPS regulations what they call the 24-month wilding rule. In other words, all lion farmers would have to put the lion, once the lions had been grown out, they would have to be put out into a large camp where they would hunt prey animals and live a relatively wild existence, even though it was permissible to supplement the food, for 2 years, for 24 months. And we criticized that proposal at the time, saying, look, those lions are still used to being fed by humans. They're still habituated to humans. They've been bottle-fed and hand-reared. It's all a pretense. And what you're really saying is, if you can pretend that a lion that's been put out into a larger camp for 2 years is a wild lion, then we, the government, can pretend that we've banned canned hunting. And in fact, the minister actually announced that he had banned canned hunting, whereas, of course, he had done no such thing. All he had done was to indulge in a little bit of public relations. However, the South African Predator Breeders Association took the minister to court because it was expensive and inconvenient for them to try to implement this 24-month wilding rule. They lost in the High Court, but they took it on appeal, and they succeeded in the Supreme Court of Appeal on quite an interesting basis. They succeeded on the basis that lion farming had nothing whatever to do with conservation. It was a closed circuit, in the words of the appeal judges, and therefore the Minister for Conservation had no jurisdiction to impose any restrictions whatever upon them. So the current situation is that lion farming is not governed by the Department of Agriculture, and as I've explained, it cannot be regulated by the Minister for Conservation, so it is a complete and utter free-for-all. They can swing the animals from chandeliers and shoot them with dart guns if they want to.
And just to demonstrate the power, too, that this industry has, I was very shocked to find out that so many conservation organizations actually back this industry, like WWF and a few others.
Really? That's disappointing.
Chris, am I correct?
Well, you've selected sorry, Danny, you've selected a bad example with WWF because that is a hunting organization. It was formed by its hunters, and although it tries to polish a conservation halo, and undoubtedly, let me say this, does some useful conservation work, when it comes to hunting, there's no argument. WWF is a hunting organization. You may recall recently the president of the Spanish chapter or division of WWF, King Juan Carlos, got himself into a lot of trouble coming out to Africa last year, was it, to hunt an elephant?
Yes. I totally never even made that association, and that's mind groundbreaking for me. That's unbelievable, mind-blowing for me. I totally never even thought of that. But it's crazy when you think of a conservation organization of any sort backing this kind of stuff, and it just goes to show you the reach, and as you're saying, you know, the publicity, that the public outreach that this industry has. It's just unbelievable.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. All these big industries, and make no mistake, hunting is big industry, especially in America. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at Safari Club International, it's a political constituency. It's closely allied with the National Rifle Association. I doubt if any politician in America who went up against Safari Club International would keep his seat in Congress. These guys are powerful. They're presidents and ex-presidents, and basically the who's who of the Republican Party, certainly are exclusively represented in Safari Club International. Now, you take that power and you apply it for the purpose of keeping your privileges in the vulnerable third world, and Africa is the vulnerable third world, where the dollar is king. You can pervert conservation policy so easily, and they do it. They come in here, and with their dollars, they pervert conservation policies. The American hunting industry has invaded and occupied African conservation. It owns it.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. You're right. I mean, it is. And here in the U.S., we see its power. We see, you know, how closely it is tied into politics. It's, the whole gun control thing comes back around to it as well. You're absolutely right. I mean, in the greater scheme of things, when it comes to the money we're talking about, how would ecotourism compare to the can't hunt industry? Is there a chance that ecotourism could at all displace some of the revenue that we're seeing?
Danny, there have been many studies to show that ecotourism or photographic tourism is a wonderful source of funding for conservation. And, of course, hunting tourism is a tiny fraction of overall tourism.
Correct.
The benefits to the community from ecotourism, the upstream and downstream benefits, are enormous. In fact, a large proportion of most African countries' GDP comes from tourism. Hunting is, as I've explained, of little or no public benefit at all.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, you obviously have a tremendous battle, I can only describe it as, ahead of you, working with the campaign against canned hunting. I can't even imagine the stuff that you guys are working against, you know, in your very own home, and especially having worked so close with wildlife. It's got to be really heartbreaking for you guys to see this transition happening. And it seems that with this whole situation with the Asian market for bones, it's only seemingly getting worse. What are some of the active campaigns right now that you're working on that you require the public's help with?
Yes, there is a very big deal for us coming up on the 15th of March, the Global March for Lions. Now, a large number of cities have already signed up for this, and more are coming on stream all the time. In fact, yesterday I spoke to a lady in Washington, D.C., and she'll be her NGO will be organizing a march in Washington. Currently, there will be marches in Austin, Tampa, New York, Los Angeles, and other centers I've no doubt will come on between now and March. But all over the world, from Norway to South America, from Vancouver to Adelaide and Brisbane in Australia. On the 15th of March, all those cities will feature walks for lions. I'm drafting a letter to global conservation authorities explaining why lion farming and canned hunting is such a threat to the survival of wild lion populations. And that letter will be sent out not only to all the marchers to be handed over to appropriate authorities at the destination of the march, but also circulated through the internet to anyone who's anyone in conservation, the World Bank, United Nations Environment Programme, CITES, the IUCN, the World Conservation Union, and so on, and of course relevant NGOs. So it's quite a big deal.
Excellent. We have right now in our chat room, we have some of our listeners asking if there's a place that they can go to see where the marches are taking place and participate. We have somebody from Germany.
Absolutely. All the individual cities have their own Facebook page. So it would be you would look for, say, Global March for Lions, New York, or Global March for Lions, Tampa. And that will take you to the page on Facebook.
Excellent. Andy, we got to check this out. What do you say?
I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think Chris, we're gonna definitely show up at the New York one if we can.
Yes, we will.
This sounds like a really interesting opportunity and a good chance to talk to like-minded people and hopefully make an impact of some sort to the general public, especially, which I think is largely unaware of what goes on and would probably not be anywhere near supportive, as we're seeing people are definitely having some sort of an awakening to the animals these days, as we're seeing with documentaries like The Cove and Blackfish and things like that. Hopefully something along those lines will happen, because this is a really scary situation. We've lost so many of our cats, especially over the last few decades. I can foresee nothing good coming of this if this continues on. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on and talking to us. I know it's very early for you, but we are going to do everything we can to let people know about the campaign against canned hunting. We're definitely going to spread your link around all over the place so people can become more aware of this. Is there anything at all that we can do to help you out in your battle?
That's very kind of you. I'd love to come and talk to you again closer to the time of the Global March. But if you can just publicize the Global March, you would be doing the cause a great deal of good.
No problem. We have it posted here in our chat room, and we'll definitely be posting it on our Facebook page as well.
Yeah, Chris, you absolutely you have our full support. We will do everything we can, especially getting closer to the date. And I would absolutely love to have you on closer to the date. And this way you can direct us to all the cool people to talk to down there when we go hang out and march for the lions. This is really great. This is exciting stuff. It's a travesty. From the reactions of our listeners that I'm seeing online, everybody is completely disgusted by what is happening. Many people had no idea it was a travesty to this extent. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to talking to you again.
Our pleasure, for sure. We will definitely be talking soon, Chris. Have a great day, morning, I should say, and thanks again for everything.
Okay, and a Happy New Year to you guys.
Thank you. Happy New Year as well.